about y'all hearing me. We just need to make sure that that's coming across there. I don't think they need to hear it. I mean, I don't know if you can adjust it to where anything I'm saying is going online right now. Never mind. Okay. All right. We switched over? Okay. Well, welcome. Tonight we're having Bible study here at Lakeview Church. If you're online, join us on YouTube or on Facebook, either live or later. If you have a question, you can type that in. If you have prayer requests, share those. I've got some folks that will check those out, and we're going to make announcements, then we're going to do Bible study, and then we will stop the stream and have our prayer time. So again, if you're in town, we welcome you to come on up here and be part of that. So a couple of announcements. Most of y'all know we do a thing called a Filet of Soul, which is, how would you describe it? A fellowship dinner group of adults, couples, or it doesn't have to be couples, but just and we did that for a year and just had a great time. Yeah, my bulletin's here somewhere, but yeah, thank you, ma'am. And these bulletins are available online if you didn't get one in person. But this coming Sunday, we have our kickoff meeting, which will include a cookout. I think she said we're having like burgers and hot dogs or something like that. And that'll be at 7 o'clock here at our church in the fellowship hall. And any adults are invited, and what we're looking just to get some information, and then if you sign up, once you're here, then you'll be put in a group of about 6 to 8 adults, mostly couples, but again, non-couples are welcome. And you can, I think we meet monthly, right? In either people's homes, we meet at restaurants, and we just had our group had a lot of fun. We always had some activities, and our last end of the year thing, we dressed up in 60s garb and went to Savastano's and had a lot of fun. So, anyway, so we'd love for you to be part of that, and that is this coming Sunday night. If you can't make it Sunday night, please let Teresa Ward know, and she'll make sure you get on that list. But we would love to have even more people involved. Go ahead.
We're going to do the draft that night?
I don't know how they're doing that. I don't know. I don't know how they're doing the draft. So on that, there's a Ladies' Day Out thing next Saturday. Is that? Yeah, a week from this coming Saturday. Yeah. Yes, a week from. Yeah, so I can tell them about that next Wednesday. So it's not.
They have to sign up by Sunday.
Oh, you need to sign up by Sunday. They're going to. Okay, they're going to Claremore to a ministry called She Brews in Claremore for brunch and testimony time. It's a neat ministry, kind of coffee shop and other things, and so that is it's Saturday the 18th they're going, but they need to know by this Sunday if you're wanting to go. And then I've got one other announcement. I'm going to read my email so I get the details right. I sent this out to the deacons, but many of y'all know Russ and Candy White, and they were retired, sold their house, got their motor home, and they're going to do ministries all over the country. And they finished a couple of them. So Russ sent me an updated email. So this is prayer requests, which we'll share later, but there's an announcement I need to make as well. But they're going to be right now. They are in Rio Doso, New Mexico, and they're going to be finishing up there on the 16th of September. And then their next project's going to be in Missouri, but that starts on October 1st. So they're actually going to be back from the 20th until the 29th. And so what would like, then he's going to come. They're going to share about what they've been doing on Sunday the 26th. So that'd be cool. But what they're needing is, if possible, if anyone knows someone locally who could accommodate a 40-foot motorhome they have a 30 amp or a 50 amp. And they're trying to avoid having to stay in a private place, like a private RV place. They're looking at maybe out at the lake. I don't mind them staying here, but I don't think we have a 30 or 50 amp hookup here at the church. So that was just a question. If you happen to know of anybody who has a place where they could park it and run electricity, they do have a generator, so they can be self-contained if they have to, but just to be. So I wasn't sure that might be a possibility too. So. Yeah, I mean, I think the only place they'd get something else would be at an RV park. So I think, but you'd have room for them to put a 40-foot.
Got a long driveway up back to my shop.
Yeah, you do, don't you?
Sitting next to the.
Okay. You guys gonna be around then?
Oh, yeah.
No cruises lined up?
I started the job, so.
That's true. That's true. So, well, great. I will give them. I mean, they know you obviously, so I'll give them the connection, and see if that works out. Then that'll be. Well, that was easy. Did you get that? Ignore the email. No.
I've got a really long extension cord that'll run from my shop to wherever they park it. Probably, well, wouldn't reach the street, but it would reach
Right.
someplace.
Well, the Lord provides. Thank you, guys. So, any other announcements or anything? That's a big thing, I think, coming up. Since you're here, I'll tell you. I was looking ahead at the calendar, and I think we did it last year and wish we hadn't. But men's breakfast will be Pioneer Day, so I figured we just wouldn't do men's breakfast this year. This. 25th. That's Pioneer Day, and I think last year because there's a race and people getting ready, and it was just kind of anyway. So we'll probably skip this month. So we'll announce that coming up. All right. If you got your Bible, turn to Psalm 37. We'll jump into that. As I had mentioned, we're going to. I don't really have a series I'm in right now. I'm toying with maybe doing a book of the New Testament, but right now I am just bringing you just things from the overflow of my own Bible reading and quiet time and stuff like that. And so I actually thought we were going to do something else, and then this morning I read Psalm 37, and I thought that'd be an interesting discussion. So let me grab my notes here. I've mentioned this a couple of times online, but I'm going to mention it to y'all in case y'all didn't catch it those other times. But one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm reading through the Psalms each month, a couple in the morning, a couple in the evening, and I have been reading them from the Septuagint, and what that means is, and just real briefly, and I say all this because I'm going to be reading along with it. In some parts, it's going to be different from what y'all have, and I think it's neat to kind of look at those together. But most of you probably remember me talking about it before. But Old Testament's written in what language? Hebrew. Old Testament's written in Hebrew, a little bit of an Aramaic, and the New Testament's written in Greek. But around 200 or so BC, the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, they had a translation of the Old Testament commissioned into Greek. It was done in Alexandria, which was the height of the Hellenistic Empire and all that. And so it's called anytime you see LXX, that means the Septuagint, it means 70, the 70 scholars. And anyway, they took their Hebrew manuscripts and they translated it into the Greek. The Hebrew manuscripts that our English Bibles are based on is called the Masoretic text, and it's like 1000 AD, and it's based on those Hebrew things. And yeah, we did discover the Dead Sea Scrolls and found commonalities and things like that. But what I've been kind of toying with and playing with reading the translation from the Septuagint, which is the Greek version of the Old Testament, instead of the Hebrew, and just kind of noticing some of the differences. And here's one of the reasons why. It's not just because I like to geek out on that stuff, though that's part of it. When the disciples and the apostles were quoting the Old Testament, and we read that in Acts, we read that in all Paul's letters and in Hebrews and all that, they're not quoting the Hebrew, they're quoting the Greek Septuagint. The Bible, so anytime in the New Testament where Jesus or Peter refers to the Scriptures or the Bible, and then they quote it, they're doing the Septuagint. They're quoting the Greek. That was their, just like you and I, you brought your Bible. The Bible not that you had to be rich to be able to bring a Bible back then, but the Bible that they would be having and would be preaching and teaching was the Old Testament in Greek. It was the Septuagint. And one of the things I've discovered as I read this, and this is this psalm is going to have a kind of a point to that as well. It's not as big a deal as some places, but you'll notice it. The Septuagint translation, what's the best way to put that, is a lot more Messiah friendly than the Hebrew translation. Even though it's not a Christian translation, it was done by the Jews 200 years before Christ. But there are so many things there that just, you read that and you think, well, that sounds just like Jesus. That sounds like it's just talking about the Messiah. And whereas the Hebrew not always so clear. One of the examples is going to be in this psalm. It's a lesser, to a lesser extent, but well, let's just look at that, and then we'll come back and look at the whole thing. Look at verse. Where is it? Verse 11 of chapter 37. Somebody read that in your translation.
But the meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace.
There you go. Anybody else have something just a little bit different?
But the humble will inherit the land and will enjoy abundant prosperity.
Yeah, and that again, it's not a big deal, but it's you can say the meek, the humble, and that kind of means the same thing. But have you ever heard that verse before? Does it sound familiar? Something Jesus said? Yeah, Jesus is quoting Psalm 37:11 as he formulates and puts together the Beatitudes. And the meek shall inherit. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And then the wording in that is taken straight out of the Greek of Psalm 37:11. The meek shall inherit the land or the earth in this case. And so, anyway, that's just an example of some things like that. So I'm actually going to use this. I just got in the mail today this recent translation of the Psalms from the Septuagint, and I've been having fun with it. So anyway, so let's look at Psalm 37. Yep, sorry.
How often did the common man have access to written word? Before Jesus' time or during Jesus' time?
The common rich man had
Wealthy man would have it.
had access.
Most of it was confined pretty much to the temple or to the
Synagogue. During Jesus' time, it had been the synagogue. And they would have had the Hebrew. They would have had the Hebrew scrolls, but then they would also the common man that had access and it could read would be reading the Septuagint. More of the Jews would be able to read the Greek than the Hebrew.
But a wealthy man could actually purchase his own copy.
Yeah.
Which copy?
And then you're right. Yeah, we say copy so easily. It would be which is why it was cost money. That's why it was wealthy. It would they couldn't go down to the.
You had to be able to hire a scribe that could do it.
Yeah.
It's capable.
Which is interesting. You're making me chase rabbits, brother. That's okay. Sometime we can include that in a study sometime about how Paul wrote his letters, because Paul didn't write any of his letters. He dictated them, but not even just dictation. The process was different than we think of, like an executive and a secretary or something like that. It wasn't like that. It was kind of a collaboration, and it was expensive. They had to hire the people to do that. I mean, and they were believers, and they had to, and then the equipment and everything else. It was a major ordeal that probably went through multiple rewrites before they sent it out. I mean, it was just a lot different than us just sitting down writing a letter. And so it was. There's some interesting things, but it was, again, that's not the main reason. That's one of the reasons they were so cherished. They were valuable, but they were inspired. Obviously they were coming from the Apostle Paul. So. But yeah, it's tell you the study of the transmission of letters and of the Bible and things like that from back during that time is just fascinating. I think it's fascinating because we take it ever since the printing press. Well, even the printing press early on, you still had to, a lot of rich people, and then they started making it to the masses, and the printing press, we take for granted that, we have it in our. Most of it was oral. They depended on the teachers and the preachers and the pastors and things like that to do. So, Psalm 37. I have titled this psalm, borrowing my wife's love of the Fast and the Furious series, The Fate of the Faithless, okay, instead of The Fate of the Furious, even though The Fate of the Furious works in here as well. But The Fate of the Faithless. And here's what grabbed me on this psalm. And so just before, and we're just going to kind of work through it. We don't have time to do it in detail, and it's kind of repetitive is the wrong word, but it covers the same area with lots of different examples and statements. But just to nail it down, what we have in this Psalm of David noticed that what every generation of believers has noticed and often struggled with, and that is, and so I want you to think about again. This is David's writing this 3,000 years ago anyway, more. and so it's like nothing new under the sun. You know, the things don't, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same. He noticed, they noticed, like we noticed, that, you know, we believe in God, and we believe you ought to be faithful to God, and we believe you ought to obey God. And generally, if you do that, then good things happen. And generally, if you don't do that, then bad things happen. And so, generally, if you live right, then you are blessed. And those who live in rebellion, you know, suffer the consequences. Except for when they don't, which also seems like all the time somewhere. That was a problem back then, just like it is today. And so this psalm, and this isn't the only psalm, there's several psalms like this, was written kind of thinking about the fact that, you know, I look all around and I see that faithless, wicked, there's different words used to describe unrighteous people, they seem to be living in nice houses and don't seem to be getting the same sicknesses that the righteous people do. They don't seem to be having the same troubles that they have. You know, these people ignore God, but they seem to suffer no ill effects. Remember when you were a kid, if you grew up in a Judeo-Christian type, I can still remember as kids, you know, we were afraid. Well, I remember a kid, you know, those kids would cuss, but no one would take the Lord's name in vain. I remember the first time someone did, we were just ready for lightning to strike because we thought immediately, you know, that was going to happen, you know, and then it didn't. And you realize, you know, sometimes you wish God wouldn't let you get away with those things. But so we look and we see that those who ignore his ways seem to suffer no ill effects, but those who seek to live for God often suffer and struggle. And then sometimes it seems like there's just no moral order in the world. So thinking about that, I think you all kind of nodded. So what are some examples, those concurrent examples of this seeming inequity? Can you think of some examples? Maybe you felt them, or maybe you just hear them, or just some things. That's just not right.
You just think of some of all the people that we would consider to be moral or whatever, of how successful they are, how, you know, rich and famous and revered by society that they are.
Yeah, name one that comes. One always comes to mind when I think of this. I think he died, but anyway. Hugh Hefner. Yeah, I always think of Hugh. You know, here's a guy who's lived his whole life, and you know, yeah, and never, you know, from our appearances, never seems to suffer any ill effect. He's wealthy and renowned, and not repentant. Doesn't seem to be even on his deathbed, but yet.
But on the opposite hand, you see some people who you can just look at them and say, "Boy, they're living a hard life."
Yeah.
You know.
Well, look at what's happening to the baker in Colorado. He just keeps trying to
Yeah.
serve.
Yeah, and the opposite. Yeah, the good people that the bad things happen to.
Yeah, and they just keep attacking him over and over again.
Well, we can look at current. What about, you know, let's call it, in a sense, faithful Afghanis who tried to help the American government, you know, or both American but even, you know, native Christians in Afghanistan who had a sense of freedom, and now, you know, they didn't do anything wrong to deserve what's happening to them now, you know, and yet these, what we would consider evil, wicked men and governing forces coming in, you know, men who used to be in our Guantanamo or whatever, you know, different things like that. And now they're, and it looks like they're just getting, I mean, so you look at that and it ain't right. And it's not right, you know, but and do you ever wonder why, you know, why is God?
Stop them.
Yeah, zap them.
Why is he withholding his hand?
Right. Why does he let stuff like this? So that stuff happens all the time. I mean, we can look at COVID, and we look at, you know, you look at someone who goes and has a COVID party and doesn't even get sick, then someone who takes all the precautions and who's a righteous missionary pastor, he gets sick, and then he just gets sick, he dies in 10 days. You know, those things don't, I mean, so can you think of any, I mean, those are pretty, but those are real examples. Can you think of anything else? Just things that just don't seem right. You didn't say anything yet. Anything?
Well, just in your job situation, where you see people get away with not following the rules, and it get treated, you know, they push the limits on, and somehow, you know, the upper hand gives in and lets them get away with things that they might
How long has that been?
I don't know, I had to come back up
Oh,
here
well.
because I was looking at the string, and everything.
If you've been frustratingly yelling at your screen, my microphone is now on. I apologize. Okay, I'm not going to rehash all that.
Earlier, because you had comments coming on.
If you're in town, come in person next week. Okay. I'm going to go back through all that. So the idea is you're being moved to boiling, either anger or jealousy, frustration. The word fret is often, I think my New American Standard says fret. Is a word that kind of, it describes that. And then the second word is a do not envy. Again, in the Greek, it comes from the same idea of boiling, but in this case, the emphasis seems to be more on an envy. And so you're frustrated and angry, and you're boiling at that, but then you're also a little bit envious because they're getting the good things, and they're getting away with this, and they're sometimes we can find ourselves being envious of what we believe to be their joy and their success and their happiness. And we talked about some of the current examples of that: Hollywood celebrity wealth, sometimes legal victories for those who can afford the best lawyers, unpunished blatant immorality, and I mentioned good people getting terminal diseases while ungodly people seem immune sometimes. It seems like sometimes that there's no moral order to the world. But what David's doing in this psalm is he's addressing that, because that's something that believers have struggled with for at least 3,000 years. And he's reminding us, maybe reteaching us in this psalm, that there is indeed a moral order to the world. Sometimes we don't see it. We have to take it on faith. But just like you had indicated, we don't know the whole story of really what they're going through, experiencing. David says we may not know that, but there is a story we do know, and that is the big picture and the ultimate end. And that's kind of where he's going with this, that there is Well, I don't think I'm hitting it, but if you want to hand me the handheld mic, I can do it. Test. Okay, they don't need to hear me, but as long as it can hear on there. Okay. So he lays it right out there. For like grass shall they swiftly die, like green herbs shall they swiftly wither. And so he's reminding us that it seems that way, but what's the old here today, gone tomorrow? It's going to be kind of like that. Even though we see Hugh Hefner lived a long life, but still, it's a blip in eternity. And when you hear, and he uses a whole lot of figures of speech, similes, and metaphors in this psalm, but he starts off with like grass or like green herbs. What does that speak to you? I mean, what do you think he means by that? If you, well, what's your grass doing right now? Unless you're watering it. Yeah, it withers away, or like dandelions that show up and then they're gone. And then he just kind of repeats that with the idea of a green herb, that just these things that we know that they may look beautiful and they may be there, but they're going to immediately be gone, and they could be consumed by fire. Fire, just thinking about right now, the fires going on in California. Oh my goodness, the ones that jumped the Sierras, and apparently they saved Tahoe, Lake Tahoe, their area there, South Tahoe. But just all these things, then they're gone. And even trees that you wouldn't think, they're gone. And then he begins to give multiple examples of these things with the repeated calls to live a righteous life in light of eternity. So basically what he's saying in this psalm is step back, take the long view, take the big picture view. And so let's just walk through this and just see what he's talking about. So what do? He says, verse 3, hope in the Lord, be gracious, dwell in the land, and you will be tended by its riches. Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. Reveal your way to the Lord, set your hope in him, and he shall bring it to pass. He shall bring forth your righteousness as light, your justice as the noonday sun. And then yours may say, be still or silent. Mine says, submit to the Lord and pray, supplicate him, talk to him. Never envy him who prospers in his way, nor the one successful in wicked schemes. So taking that as a unit, what's he basically telling us to do? We're tempted to be moved to jealousy, to envy those, to be frustrated with what seems the inequity of life. But he said instead, remember how temporary, how transitory it is. Remember, it's here, but it's going to be gone. Instead, you have a better way. What is the better way? How would you summarize that, verses 3 through 7? Trust in God. Yeah. It's kind of like what Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, isn't he? He said, it's all vanity, it's this, that, but at the end of the day, trust in God. Just serve him. Yeah. Right. 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 It is kind of like he's refocusing. He's like saying, okay, quit looking over there. Look back right here. This is the truth.
I think that's always a good lesson in life. Is focus on other people, what they've got and what they do, and focus on yourself and your relationship with God and what's before you to do. And your happiness isn't in what other people do.
Right. Or shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And if it is, it's wrong.
Right.
Because you're going to be let down. They will always let you down. Only God's going to be able to be immutable truths, God's law.
Mm-hmm.
What you were saying earlier, what goes around comes around.
Reap what you sow. And
So
yeah.
that's a fundamental law of God.
And I think it's easy to forget that sometimes, and maybe I think sometimes, at least the way I catch that, we tend to just long for the life that we see others have. Maybe we don't, but I see that in other people, and it's just it's easily tempting, I think, to be envious. And again, maybe maybe you struggle with that, maybe you don't, maybe it's at times and things like that. But it is a good reminder, and I think what you said, Crystal, just these things. This is what we have. But look at the good we have before us. We to hope in the Lord, dwell in the land, and be tended by its riches, or to be fed. I think it's literally be pastured by what God has to give you. That's a beautiful picture in verse 3. To be pastured by. It literally has to do like a shepherd tending his flock, taking care, which makes you think of Psalm 23. That we, what's he going to do? He's going to provide green pasture and still waters. He's going to nourish and be with us. If we turn to him, he is going to take care of us. It just seems like sometimes that's easier said than done. And sometimes we wish he'd take care of us in more abundance, and it seems like he does sometimes, if we're being honest. I mean, we know that he does and he will, but then it still can be a struggle.
Twice in these verses it says, trust in him, which I think is a key.
Mm-hmm.
We got to trust in what we can't see. What we can't see that he is, like they said, whatever those people are going through in their life, they can't be at peace.
Yeah, yeah,
They can't have a true peace and healing in their lives, but we just trust.
right.
Trust in that God is working, and when we do that, then I think we can rest in him.
Right.
that's shaping us.
Good.
It's just a trust.
You know, and even if they are really enjoying their life, it's still the long view comes back again. You know, we've got to take the realize where this all ends, and that becomes part of it. Are we going to look at just what the here and now holds, or are we truly going to believe that both in this life will we be blessed, but that the weight of glory that far outweighs comes then? And if we really believe that, then we keep that in view. You gonna say something, Matt? Oh, I thought you were about to say something. Okay. Right.
And as he walked through that, I mean, how many years could you live like that?
Right.
And finally, towards the end, he saw. But he kept that faith, though.
Right. But all along, he could have, falsely accused, falsely imprisoned, forgotten. All those, we talked about that last week. But yeah.
Life as well, and we can look back at that picture of Joseph and see the end result. We don't in our own life yet. I mean, we know it's coming, but we don't know really what God's doing all the time.
Right.
Yeah, I think we could all write the sad story of all the bad things that happened.
Yeah.
But you could also say, okay, write everything that's good, every blessing up. I mean, it's just what your focus is.
Right.
And I think that's what those verses say is when your focus is in the right direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to see and notice, and it's not going to bother you.
Right.
I don't know. I've had times in my life when I saw and I noticed, and I wasn't happy. I look back
Right.
from this point now, look back on my life, and I can see how God has helped, shaped, grown, and be there. But at the time, I didn't always look to him. I saw my situation, and it was bad. I knew he could fix it, but it didn't look like he was doing anything. So it's very nice to say all this, but when you're in the middle of a bunch of alligators, it's a little hard. Yeah, if I sit down and somebody calls me on that and we talk about it, it does come back to the Lord. And yes, he's the only one in charge, because I'm sure not, because take a look around. But I guess I'm just saying that sometime along the way, I'm less than, or have been less than satisfied or happy with the specific time when I was dealing with. I mean, I wasn't happy when Norm died.
Right. Oh yeah.
I wasn't happy when Norm's retirement was absconded and we lost everything. That wasn't a fun time. I can look back from this point and see how God has seen us through even with small steps. But at the time being, I wasn't a happy camper.
I've known a couple of fellas, a couple of people over my lifetime, and I can look back from young fellas that have been brought up in church, their families in church, and they decided to chase an alternate lifestyle. And when that happened, they would still come around the church, but they would be antagonistic. They were not happy. They were not easy to deal with people. They were working on being happy with their choice, and they weren't happy. They were miserable. And that's a different perspective. That's the guy that doesn't want to follow the Lord. He wants to follow his own lust.
Right.
And it eats at him because he knows better. But he doesn't want to know better. He's going to drag his feet and fight and cuss
Yeah.
and try to disturb everybody else as they do it too.
Right.
One of the guys would stand on the front porch of the church. There was literally a little porch outside the front
Mm-hmm.
door of the vestibule, and he'd stand out there and try to get the other young people to come out there so he could talk to them. He didn't want to come in, but
Right. Crystal, you mentioned about looking back, and that's whether we may not get to it, but towards the end of this psalm, if you go ahead and look ahead towards the end, you'll see we find out that David is writing this towards the end of his life. He is looking back, and that's one reason he's able to have that perspective and to encourage those. See if I can find, where is it?
In verse 35, he says, I have seen the wicked and
Yeah, but he specifically says, I was young and now I'm old. There is verse 25. And that refers to as well. Verse 25, once I was young, now I'm old. Yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his children begging bread. Day in, day out, he's merciful and lends, and his children shall be blessed. He is looking back on and helping those coming behind him to realize and to remember that you need to look up and know that this isn't the whole story, and that, again, it's beautiful grass and smells like great fresh green herbs, but they're going to swiftly wither and swiftly die. Verse 4, we hear quoted a lot, and I didn't know if you knew this is where it was. Now you know the context, but he says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. How does that grab you? What do you think on that for a minute? Any comments on that idea? Is that like a blank check?
Delighting in the Lord, maybe. But that's the criteria.
Yeah.
Is to delight in the Lord, not in worldly lusts.
Yeah.
Delight in the Lord and his precepts, his teaching,
Right.
his love, his care. Delight yourself in that, and what you're going to want in your heart.
Actually, right, and you hit on it there. I think if we're delighting, if that becomes the pattern of our life day in and day out, and we're growing in our delight of the Lord, which means we're in his word, we're worshiping him, we're with his people, that's going to shape us, isn't it? Our delight in the Lord is going to change our wants and desires and our delights. I heard it put one time, and I think it's more than this, but it's not less than this, that if our delight is in the Lord, then what does become the ultimate desire of our heart? Him. And he promises to give himself. If we delight in him, then he becomes the ultimate desire. And he basically says here, I'll give myself to you. You'll have me. It means more than that, but it doesn't mean less than that. I mean, it's got to be part of that. So, and again, in the context, we may not feel like we're getting the desires of our heart right now or even anytime soon. And some of these greatest desires may wait till glory, but we will get them. He will give us what our heart truly desires. And, we might start with that verse and think that, what's the old country song, Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz or something like that? And we may think that's what we want, the desire of our heart. But, is that okay? There you go, Janis Joplin. But that as we grow in that delight, I think our delight changes. So I think that's good. So, okay, just moving on. He says, cease from anger and forsake wrath. This is verse 8. Do not let envy lead to evil deeds. How does that read in American Standard? Cease from anger, forsake wrath. Do not fret. It leads only to evil doing. I think that's interesting. He's going back again, back to his very first sections. Don't be moved to jealousy. Don't envy. He's saying again, don't fret. Don't be upset. Don't be boiling with anger or frustration or jealousy. Forsake the anger that you're feeling towards that. And then there's a warning. Don't let that lead to evil deeds. I can think of at least two general ways, but y'all probably think of more. If we were to give in to this envy, even this frustration and anger over the inequity of it, how might that lead us to evil deeds? Yeah, there's one obvious one, isn't it? We may decide, we keep thinking about it, we may finally decide that we start chasing those things and want to become like them. And we give up on being good or whatever, trying to strive for righteousness, and we just give in and follow along with that. What's another? That's the first one I thought of. I thought of a second one. You may think of more. Yeah, revenge or just seething with anger and bitterness, and if righteous anger is right, but even then, I think God wants us to be careful with it and don't let it don't let it stay overnight, and don't give the devil a foothold. Even righteous anger, things that start out with righteous anger can take hold and corrupt us. I think opens the door for the passions as well. Can you think of any other way that it might lead to evil deeds? I think, like you said, revenge, especially. You might. Then that happens, doesn't it? People, maybe normal people who are upset about something express that, but they know they're not going to reach out in violence, but others may take it to an extreme. And I think we've seen that in our society, for years, for generations. But good. Keep reading. For evildoers shall be cut off, and that phrase shows up a whole lot, or utterly destroyed. And so again, 3 or 4 times he mentions that because that's what's going to happen to them. But those who wait on the Lord shall inherit the earth. And that phrase, inheriting the earth or inheriting the land, shows up 3 or 4 or 5 times too. So that's an important idea. For in a little while the evildoer shall perish. You shall look for his place, but not find it. Again, a reminder. He repeats that phrase later. That it looks like they're established, looks like they're almost eternal, but pretty soon you're going to look, and they won't be there. An example of that might be the one-hit wonders, we might call it. Whether it's a band or a celebrity or just something that's that's so popular, but then now it's like who and it's gone. Or the person who what happens over and over. Your young professional athlete suddenly inundated with millions and millions of dollars. The next thing you know, they've, Vince Young comes to mind, but it's all gone. They've wasted it, and they've done all that, and now they can't get a job, can't do anything. It just you see that everything looks great. I wish I was like him. The next thing you know, as you said, you didn't know what was going on inside, and then they're gone. In a little while, you look for them, can't find them. Verse 11, but the meek shall inherit the earth, taking delight in the fullness of peace. The sinner shall sharply watch the just man, gnashing at him with his teeth, but the Lord shall laugh at him, foreseeing that his day will come. The wicked have drawn the sword. And here's a phrase. The wicked have drawn the sword, and they've bent back their bow to cast down the poor and needy, to slay the upright in heart. But what's going to happen? Their sword that they have drawn is ultimately going to enter their own heart. And the bow that they've bent back is ultimately going to break in their hands. So that is going to happen. And then he says, verse 16, you probably heard this phrase before too, better the little that the just or righteous man has than great riches of the sinner. And we may just have to keep telling ourselves that. Better the little that I have instead of pursuing wealth in a way that compromises my morality. Let's see. Verse 17, for the arms of the wicked shall be broken, but the Lord upholds the righteous. The Lord knows the way of the blameless. Their inheritance shall be forever. They shall not be disgraced in evil time. In days of famine they shall be filled. But the wicked shall perish. The Lord's enemies shall vanish when they glorify and exalt themselves. Like smoke they shall vanish away. The sinner borrows and will never repay. The righteous shows mercy and gives. For those blessing him shall inherit the earth. Those cursing him shall utterly perish. The Lord rightly directs a man's steps, and he shall delight in his way. And I love this verse. When he stumbles, and people who are trying to live for the Lord will stumble. We will stumble. But we will not fall headlong or be cast down. Why? Verse 24. We're going to fall and stumble, but what happens? Yeah, he upholds it. It's like his hand is there to lift us up, to keep us. We're not going to fall headlong. So we will stumble, we will struggle, but God's going to catch us. Now, sometimes we wonder if he's going to, but there's a promise that he will. And then the verse we read, once I was young, now I'm old. I've not seen the righteous forsaken or his children begging bread. Day in and day out, he's merciful and lends. His children shall be blessed. So what do? Depart from evil, do good, and dwell forever. For the Lord loves judgment, will never forsake his saints. There's another one of those words I was meant. Does yours say saints or godly ones or Faithful ones, yeah. And that's one of those, again, where in the Greek it's the same word that says saints in the New Testament, and it connects those together, the holy ones. They shall be kept safe forever, but the children of the ungodly shall be utterly destroyed. Now that sounds bothersome at first, but it's more just the natural. I think it's the idea that the children of somebody is those that are like them. The offspring they produce by their actions, that type of thing. It's not just saying innocent children are suddenly going to be destroyed, but that those who follow after them, those who share in typically the children follow that as well, but they shall be destroyed. The righteous shall inherit the earth and dwell in it forever. The mouth of the righteous shall speak wisdom. But back to verse 29, and we've seen that several times, this will inherit the earth, dwell in it forever. Jesus picks up on that in the Beatitudes. But really, isn't that our promise? You know, it looks like right now, like, you know, the Taliban has inherited all of Afghanistan, and maybe this has all of that property, and we wonder about all of that. But there's a promise that says, no, the faithful are the ones who are going to inherit the whole earth. How does that get fulfilled? What is that? How does that promise get fulfilled? What's our hope and our promise? I'm just reminding you of some things I taught you before. Yeah, what happens when he comes back? In the end, he makes all things right, and what happens to this world? Yeah, I like the word renewed. Destroyed, yes, except same way that your body's destroyed, but renewed. You get a brand new body. It's your body, but it's renewed. We get a brand new earth. It's this earth, but it's renewed. That destroyed by fire is an idea of judgment and purifying and cleansing. And so at the end, we inherit the earth. We don't live in heaven forever. Heaven comes down to earth, and we inherit the earth. We are going to inherit the earth, and those that are ungodly and unfaithful, they don't. You know, they are cast into the lake of fire. And so we see that mentioned, these ideas mentioned several times, and that we need to remember that there is an end, and in looking back, it's all going to, the scales are going to work right on grace. The law of God, the mouth of the righteous shall speak wisdom, verse 30, and his tongue talk of judgment. The law of God is in his heart, none of his steps shall stumble. The wicked watches the righteous and seeks to slay him, but the Lord will not leave him in his hands, nor condemn at all when he judges him. Wait on the Lord, endure patiently his way, and he will exalt you to inherit the earth. There's that phrase again. You shall see the sinners utterly cut off or destroyed. I have seen the ungodly greatly exalted, lifting himself up like the cedars of Lebanon. Yet I passed by, and behold, he was no more. I sought him out, but his place could not be found. Preserve innocence, be witness to uprightness, for such is what remains for the peaceful. But the transgressor shall be utterly cut off or destroyed. What remains for the ungodly is utter destruction. But the Lord is the salvation of the righteous, their defender in times of affliction. And the Lord shall help them and deliver them. He shall deliver them from sinners and save them because they have hoped in him. So, in summary, the giving into our anger and envy and jealousy is not good. It leads to evil. We mentioned that. We can become consumed by sinful pride or attitudes. We may be drawn towards that life as well. A better way is to delight in the Lord, to be still before him, to trust in him and put our hope in him. David goes throughout this and he describes different ways to remind us that even though it looks like the faithless and the wicked, that everything might be going their way, he says, here's what's going to happen to them. And here's just a summary. They will wither quickly like grass, fade like herbs, will be cut off or utterly destroyed. He says that 5 times. In a little while, there'll be no more, twice. Look for him, but won't be able to find him, twice. His day is coming. Their sword will enter their own heart. Their bow will be broken. Their arms will be broken, their strength. They will perish. They will vanish like flowers. They will vanish like smoke. They will be altogether destroyed. For the faithful, the righteous, he says, don't fret. Don't be moved to boiling. He says that 3 times. Don't be envious. So what do? Trust in the Lord. Set our hope in him. Do good. Dwell in the land. Be fed by what God gives us. Delight ourselves in the Lord. Commit our way to the Lord. Be still or submit to the Lord. Wait patiently for him. 3 times it says that. I know I need to hear that. Wait patiently for him. Cease from anger. Forsake wrath. Recognize that your little is better than their abundance. Be gracious and give. He says that twice. Depart from evil. Speak wisdom and justice. Keep God's law in your hearts. Keep God's way. Take refuge in the Lord. And for those who are righteous in Christ, those who are God's children, what is promised. Again, here's a quick summary. But listen again. We see what's going to happen to them. Even though everything looks positive for them, here's the reality. And even when things look difficult for us and we wonder if it's worth it, here's what's promised. God will give you the desires of your heart. God will do it. He will go to work on your behalf. He will bring forth your righteousness and judgment. You will inherit the land. 4 times it says that. You will delight in abundant prosperity. God will sustain you. God knows your days. You will have an eternal inheritance. You will not be ashamed in a time of evil, or not be put to shame. You will have an abundance in a time of famine. Your steps are established by the Lord. You will not fall headlong, but will be caught by God. God will not forsake you. God will preserve you forever. You will dwell in the land forever. God will not leave you in the hands of the wicked. You will see the judgment of the wicked. God will save you, twice. It mentions that. God will be your strength in trouble. God will help you. And then twice he mentions that God will deliver us. St. Augustine, I think he's in the 4th century, in commenting on this psalm, says that if we find ourselves like David, fretting, boiling because of the inequity of what seems to happen to the ungodly as opposed to the godly, he says this: drink this psalm by way of a potion, as an antidote to being angry or frustrated by the prosperity of the faithless. So if you find yourself feeling that way, woe is me, pity party, or just thinking, why, drink this psalm. Let it be God's potion to you to cure that. So, all right, let's pray, and then I'll close this in prayer, and then we'll share prayer requests. Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for this psalm that just hits us where we live, Lord, that is old but yet is fresh. Lord, help us to keep our eyes open and trained on you. Forgive us for our envy, our frustration, our boiling, Lord, towards what seems to be just the good things that happen to people who don't respect or honor you, Lord. And we struggle sometimes to wonder why things are that way. Lord, thank you for reminding us of the big picture, of your view. And Lord, open our eyes to your sacred delights and your provision for us every day, all around us. And Lord, keep us anchored also in the future, knowing that one day all will be made right. In Jesus' name we pray.